I'm very familiar with needing backup, trust me. Been down that road a million times, and it's tough.
Yeah. Me and JD actually recorded the conspiracy theory episode about 3 months ago, and for whatever reason, the audio that came out of the other end of Zoom was it was extremely crunchy.
Oof.
Yeah, really fucked up.
You got that Vermont audio.
Yeah.
Beautiful audio this time of the year.
Yeah,
with the leaves changing and everything.
No, we know it's winter there now.
It's already 25 degrees.
There are things we know, but there are also the ones we don't know.
I welcome this kind of examination.
The power of the presidency doesn't rest here.
Covert operation. Grave danger to the civilized world.
All right. So let's go ahead and kick this off. Thank you so much, Sean, for coming on our little show.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Yeah, this is Sean KB from the venerable Antifada podcast, among others. We're glad to have him here. This is Abby.
Hi.
She's Abby, and I'm Jack. And
Jack.
we're short-staffed. We have no producer Brad or JD today, but we're going to make do. I think Sean will be able to fill in. He doesn't know that much about metallurgy, I assume.
I actually know a lot about metallurgy, but
really? Okay.
Yeah.
If you sprinkle that in, that will really get the Crack Ops vibe, and then we can start bantering about architecture and.
I know metallurgy to the extent that I'm in the trades, and I'm pretty good with the oxyacetylene blowtorch and a welding stick. So, I'm on like the back end of metallurgy where you're just destroying things or like tying metal together.
Yeah. Well, JD would be more screaming about crystal lattices or something right now. He'd be like, that's not metallurgy, that's engineering.
Oh, I always forget about the engineering pecking order.
Oh yeah, there's.
I'm not. Don't even get me started on engineers. I don't want to get canceled on this podcast.
Oh, I'm sorry. The anti-engineer sentiment that I'm hearing on this episode is not what I'm used to.
Well, get used to it.
We usually love engineers. We just are always talking about their wonderful social skills, body odor.
They're excellent package. Fashion choices. It's fantastic.
I joke because so much of my day at work is trying to get around unrealistic choices that engineers made in terms of materials or where to put things. So the engineers will design all sorts of stuff, and we'll have to find some way to work around it, some way to make it work. So that's my only beef with engineers.
Well, that's also what JD does. He also evades and hides from engineers and tries to make unrealistic stuff work. I think that comes from the top. I think it flows downwards.
Yeah, don't blame our comrade workers in engineering. You're right.
Bless the trades.
Tovarish grad student, JD.
There's no Blur Mountain for engineers. God, it's the worst thing ever. Them throwing calculators out of trenches with like trade show T-shirts like around their like noses like bandanas.
Love to see it.
So tell us about podcast, Jack. Tell us about conspiracies, Jack.
Okay, so conspiracy theories are what I believe in a lot of, and this whole podcast is unsubstantiated, ridiculous conspiracy theories and tinfoil hat nonsense. Or is it?
Ooh, we love to hear it.
The whole like distinction between crack ops and like just normal conspiracy bullshit, like what your racist uncle believes, is that crack ops actually happened.
And we know they happened.
Well, we know they happened. Yeah, that's the interesting thing. So this episode is going to kind of be about like the boundary problem of defining a conspiracy theory, what is, what isn't, and then talking about sort of how you can distinguish between the two and kind of the history of conspiracy theory, kind of where it comes from in the human brain. Is there a conspiracy theory organ or lobe in the mind? Possibly. I couldn't tell you.
I'm trying to imagine like an 1800s phrenology chart, but it's like if you have a big forehead, you have lots of conspiracy theories.
the conspiracy lobe must be right next to the pineal gland because that's where your third eye is. So they must interact all the time.
Yeah, the conspiracy chakra.
Yeah. The Italians have a very small third eye, so they tend to believe in heterodox views of society. That's That's why we can't let him in. Ellis Island, got to close it.
JD is screaming listening to this right now.
You want to open Ellis Island up again just so you can shut it down again?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You can go on tours.
I would say we keep the immigration system as is. Well, no, don't do that, but make it better, I guess. But open up Ellis Island just for people from Italy.
You know, I was taking a tour of
it.
Liberty Island, and I accidentally got off at Ellis Island, and they wouldn't let me back on the boat. And I'm not sure what to make about that.
Oh man, you almost had to emigrate again.
Yeah, I almost had to get my U.S. visa.
Yeah, Abby looks far too Northern Irish Protestant to be allowed back into the United States.
You know, I shouldn't have been wearing my Orange Order T-shirt. That's what really did it.
Yeah, she has long hair, so you can't see it now. But there's a big tattoo of the red right hand of the Ulster Constabulary.
Oh yeah, right on my neck.
Yeah,
I'm gonna get a bunch of SoundCloud rapper tattoos, but they're all just gonna be about Ulster loyalism.
Where the hell did I end up? How did I end up on a Ulster loyalist engineering podcast?
Yeah, this is like
we came here to build peace barriers.
The main conspiracy theory we'll be talking about is the idea of Ireland, as they call it.
And the existence of Italian people, as they call them. Italy is totally made up. Italian as a language is completely, it's just some gibberish that people say online. Don't believe a word of it. Italy and Italians are fake.
They're just Eastern Spaniards. But so tell me, Jack, before we get Italy tracked again.
Before we keep just going down the thing that we do every time and cutting out 20 minutes of esoteric European racism. Not even kidding. That's
an ongoing problem.
The term conspiracy theory is very old because it's two very common words. It just describes the theory you have that something was a conspiracy. The conspiracy to murder Julius Caesar is real. People had theories about that at the time. They were conspiracy theorists. But it really, like the terms together.
Conspiracy theory, TM with a capital C.
Yeah. Like the real modern conspiracy theory term really comes out of the Warren Commission describing the assassination of JFK. So what the Warren Commission comes out with is the official state report on JFK's death. That is considered to be the orthodox, acceptable theory. And the ones who allege a conspiracy, and not just one dude clipping this guy, are the conspiracy theorists because they theorize that there is a conspiracy. So it has like a very specific origin in that.
And it only, in that sense, then it only really came out of that in such a big way because by necessity, if you didn't believe the Warren report, it had to be a conspiracy, which takes at least two people, right? So anyone who thinks that there are any added characters in this whole thing are all of a sudden not just conspiracy theorists, but also deeply embroiled in like a very political debate, right, about what happened with JFK and under what conditions.
Yeah, and it's not just the origin of the term, like you say, where they have to believe in more than one person, thus a conspiracy. It's also sorry, I got like 3 hours of sleep last night. They're alleging basically like a state conspiracy, and so it draws like a political line on one side, orthodox theory, and the accepted reality that we live in. On the other side, political opposition. Like not just disbelief in authorities, but also a kind of political opposition.
Now, with the Warren Commission report, I know that the Warren Commission was actually pretty damn understaffed because President Johnson just kind of wanted it all to be done with. Though I'm not all that familiar. Did that have anything to do with this? Like, what intern came up with conspiracy theory?
Well, I mean, it wasn't fully staffed with nephews, unlike a lot of what we cover on this show. There were some reputable people, but it was a shit show. I mean, it was like the...
Well, my understanding is that the volume of information they had to deal with versus the tiny team they had.
Oh, yeah, and it was a deadline, too. I mean, they had to get that out quick because there were so many conspiracy theories.
I've read the Warren Commission report, at least part of it. And the one thing I remember about it is that it's not as detailed as I thought it would be. And they describe in JFK's autopsy, they describe his hair as like light reddish chestnut or some really florid. Like the doctor was just there stroking his hair, being like, "It's the color of copper and caramel." So that's memorable.
So the Warren Commission is, people are so skeptical of it that a lot of talk has been around the Warren Commission itself and who it was staffed with, Earl Warren included, was itself part of the conspiracy because it was such a quick and relatively slipshod look at what happened to JFK.
Yeah, it was not super thorough. I mean, it could have been worse, but like their main objective, definitely, even to people at the time, seemed to be just to get something out of the door to tell.
Well, yeah, I mean, Johnson wanted to start. He was already having his people refer to him as president before he was sworn in. He showed like no emotion apparently when he was sworn in. He was just so ready to go.
Well, he did it. So anyway,
All right,
the official crack op stand.
Right, done and dusted. On to the next one. 9/11. Surprising views on this one.
Oh, I'm a barista, and today I said in a very chipper voice, "That's 9/11." And the person stared at me for like 2 seconds and said, "I won't forget that." I noticed that was a strange thing to say as I was saying, "That's 9/11."
Yeah. So out of the whole mess with the Warren Commission and what a shit show it was comes this term of conspiracy theorist. And from this specific event, it develops the modern connotation of the tinfoil hat guy, and someone who doesn't trust the government. Like previous conspiracy theories had just been thinking that JFK was going to sell the country to the Pope because he was Catholic, or hating Freemasons, or being an anti-Semite, which are all time-tested beliefs. Like that's just kind of run-of-the-mill bigotry. But it's like the combination of mass media with a less comprehensible, more fast-moving world kind of creates this term.
Well, and a distrust in the government. Because, the events of the 60s and 70s, sort of people see behind the curtain.
Well, in the 50s, in the decade right before JFK is assassinated, you had an official government conspiracy that said that the U.S. state, that various institutions within U.S. society were being undermined by a conspiracy of communists, by subversive forces within the government that were trying to take it down from the inside. So by the time you get to 1963, you've gone through McCarthyism, you've gone through the HUAC, you've thrown a bunch of people out of their jobs. The unions have had communists stripped out of them. It was a very anti-communist moment in U.S. history, and that began from an official conspiracy theory, essentially, that commies are everywhere, there's reds under the bed. So it's not surprising then in this moment of polarization and distrust in 1963 that people are like, oh yeah, we hear about conspiracies all the time. My teacher got thrown out of school for being a commie. Okay.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that that's not a conspiracy theory. Like when Dick Nixon starts red baiting people and saying that they have Moscow connections, like that's not a conspiracy theory.
No, that's not. That's just hard-hitting politics.
And so that's like part of the definition of it then is that it's like a heterodox theory. It's like not the official line. So something that's insane, I'm trying not to be contemporary here, but like Russiagate, that is propagated by mass media and authority figures and trusted individuals, politicians, is not a conspiracy theory, like by definition. It can't be.
Oh, I never really thought of that, so...
Yeah, so Joe McCarthy getting up there.
So McCarthyism is not a conspiracy theory. Russiagate is not a conspiracy theory because they are too, from the top down. They're too mainstream. They're too tied to authority.
Yeah, exactly. They bear like all of the psychological and political hallmarks of a conspiracy theory. But
right.
The term doesn't really apply because it's just state policy almost. Yeah. So I don't know if we want to give like I have a quote here, definition. Conspiracy theories are commonly defined as explanatory beliefs about a group of actors that collude in secret to reach malevolent goals. Okay, well that also describes the crime conspiracy, which is on the books as a federal offense.
And this podcast.
In which we We pretend to not release things for months at a time, and then come at you with the hard shit.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
We've
yeah.
been waiting.
Yeah. So let's go from here and go back a little bit, and let's talk about like some older conspiracies just for a hot minute. I'd mentioned anti-Masonic sentiment and anti-Semitism, but you can almost trace the origins of the modern conspiracy theory kind of as we've defined it, as like an anti-authority kind of plebs coming up with their own explanations for events, all the way back to the Middle Ages and really the beginning of human history. Because we're storytelling apes, and when you take people who don't have maybe a lot of knowledge about the world they live in, but are curious and want to understand the world, you get some interesting stuff. Mix that in with a little bit of manipulation from the authorities, and you get something like the blood libel, which is like the oldest Western conspiracy theory. Which, for those of our viewers who are luckily not in the know about this kind of shit, the blood libel was a thing that many European Christians believed, especially the peasantry, but also the nobility, because they eventually bought their own bullshit on this, that Jewish people were kidnapping and ritually sacrificing Christian babies. Stop me if this sounds too much like QAnon. And they were using them for dark Hebraic rituals or whatever. And the funny thing is that even at the time, people would say, "Well, we have no records of this. There's no kid who went missing." It was just when the harvest was bad, they would either blame witches or they would blame the local Jewish community. And either way, somebody was getting something very nasty done to them.
Would you call that probably the earliest instance of something that we would recognize as a conspiracy theory, or are there like Sumerian tablets about how like King Enkidu is actually hoarding all of the gold ingots?
I'm a history guy. I haven't heard that, but I think it points to how modern this notion of that Jack is this type of modern conspiracy theory is, that there weren't people saying, in ancient Rome that Julius Caesar was an inside job, although it was an inside job. They say that that the Etruscans or something did it.
Yeah, Vercingetorix actually did nothing wrong. It was a setup.
So you call blood libel? Would you consider that an anomaly, or?
I was going to take that a little bit further and separate it from a real modern conspiracy theory.
Go on.
Because it's more like just peasant wisdom, and some peasant wisdom was like, if you rub this flour on a cut, then God will bless you and you won't die. And sometimes that actually would be true because the flour would have some alkaline chemical in it that would kill the bacteria. Other times it was horseshit.
Sort of an conspiracy, I guess.
Yeah, so it's like the conspiracy theory emerges out of this ooze at the bottom of your brain that also creates just kind of general peasant wisdom, like fishwives' tales.
Yeah, that's interesting because this idea of folk knowledge and the existence back in the Middle Ages of like craft knowledge is very much tied into conceptions of alchemy. Before science is a thing, before there's like the scientific method, things were done by trial and error. And so it wasn't out of the realm of possibility to say, rub this flour on you and it's going to fix you, because that's a knowledge that could have been passed down from generation to generation to generation.
Well, right. There had to be the first guy who poured liquor into one of his cuts and was like, hey, I didn't get a horrible infection and die. This is pretty sweet.
Because you don't know how things work, so people just try stuff. And then if it works, you pass it down. Same thing with the stories people tell each other, right?
Yeah. And there would be this accrued knowledge, and like 30% of it would be just absolute bullshit bunk. If you leave a horseshoe above your door, it keeps the fairies away. but then half of it would be like ways to help a woman give birth without dying.
Right.
And they had no means to distinguish between the two. I mean, that's what the Enlightenment was, just a way to create rationality, to separate the chaff from the wheat.
So give me you mentioned the modern conspiracy theory you were going to compare blood libel to.
Oh, yeah, like the JFK inside job, George H.W. Bush pulled the trigger or whatever, Ted Cruz's dad or something. That's like a modern one that has a lot more to do with living in a large-scale society with mass media and not having a ton of control over your own destiny. I was able to pull down a couple real interesting studies on conspiracy beliefs. Like every psychological study we do today, the entire population was undergrad students. So God knows if this is actually accurate.
What a scary thought.
Our modern psychology is based on upper middle class 20-year-olds who've been tested, who are all hungover.
That says a lot about what kind of people they want everybody to be.
Yeah, the Ubermensch, the first year undergrad, or grad student Ubermensch.
Thus Ubergrad.
Powered by grants, caffeine. Their first real job.
They want us all like wild-eyed and bushy-tailed, and to believe, like we did in our freshman year of college, that there is a meritocracy and that like there's a bright future ahead of us. So really, I think like so much.
Oh, I was ahead of the curve then.
so much of the media and just that the perceived wisdom of the society wants to turn you into a college freshman. They want you to feel belief in all those things and feel optimistic for the dumb future.
Well, that's depressing. Actually, can also be, no. It's hey, I'm getting my taste of that.
So these are the perfect people for them to pick when they're trying to.
I think it's more laziness.
Well, I don't know
if this is being done by grad students.
We have the two genders of theorists here. Abby with Occam's razor and Sean with the conspiracy. They want you to be like a freshman in college. I'm
going off, dude.
Hell yeah.
I think it's because I'm really lazy, so I just sort of project that onto other people.
Yeah. People who do psychology stuff are not lazy. They're quite the opposite. They just love to pick brains apart. I couldn't do it. People
so we
are
got
interesting,
JFK, we got...
Oh yeah, sorry, psychology, right. Couple psychological studies. I have no means of verifying this, but they're interesting. So a belief like just in the existence of conspiracy theories was measured with some questions and some other questions. They cross-examined them and did some fake math and so forth. And the belief in just like the existence of any kinds of conspiracies, more or less, correlated to high levels of external locus of control, which is psychological speak for belief that you don't control your life, and hostility to that, along with a low level of trust. So that describes 99% of people.
Yeah, I was going to say, that sounds like me.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's me. Okay. That's why I'm doing this show. And then believing in like particular theories. So they asked questions about like, do you believe in XYZ, XYZ, XYZ? And believing in particular conspiracy theories was more related to high levels of ennui, which just is, if you've read your marks, it's alienation. It's personal unrest, uncertainty, lack of purpose and ideals.
So you feel more anime.
Yeah, when you feel more
anime. Anime does give me anime, I have to say, but that's a topic for another show.
Yeah, the last time I watched anime was with my friends, and it was not a good experience.
I'm not going to get on my anti-anime soapbox because I will get torn down violently.
We're really going after all the most dangerous. We're going after the engineers and the anime nerds.
We're going off like half the podcasting audience is anime fans.
Yeah, you're gonna open your door one day and FedEx is gonna bring you a waifu that like has a bomb inside of
it. Western animation and its consequences have been a disaster.
We're just brave truth tellers, man. We fight we fight what we know. And we know what anime and engineers are.
You got to call them. You have to call them Asian cartoons around anime fans.
Oh, they go nuts on that. Yeah.
All right, so I got anime.
Yeah, it corresponds to high levels of anime, authoritarianism, which I don't believe that the right wing authoritarianism thing is real. Let's see. Oh, and then low level of self-esteem.
So when you say authoritarianism, do you mean expresses authoritarian views or is sort of egotistical or believes more that there is authoritarianism?
There's this test with a scale on it called the right-wing authoritarianism test or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's pure ideology, but it basically measures certain things about your mindset that correspond to like being an American movement conservative, which, yeah, exactly. Like it's written in, which I don't
I was
like.
gonna
very
say,
much.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's convincing after a certain fashion, but I just think it's too much of like Democratic smugness.
It takes like this this like ideological movement and makes it a priori, and then tries to fit people into that box. So it sounds like the whole test is like a false dichotomy. It assumes that people have to either be authoritarian or not authoritarian. There's no like gradation in between, or there's no like possibility of being something else that doesn't fit into like Democrat or Republican.
Exactly, and I don't like that about it at all. And it pathologizes political beliefs, which I also broadly disagree with. I also with the psychological stuff, I wanted to add a little addendum, like maybe a little bit more materialist, which is kind of why I thought to DM you about this.
Sure.
Why don't you maybe tell people who might not be familiar with the idea of like materialism, historical materialism, why psychology might not totally define your political beliefs? Why would a human being living in modern America be a conspiracy theorist? And why is that actually kind of justified?
Yeah.
To some certain degree or not, I don't know.
No, think about it in terms of psychology is really interesting, right? Because, and I haven't before, so I'm going to just speak on it now. Psychology obviously is about studying like the individual human and their mind and how it works, the connections that they make, the relationships that they have, basically why they believe what they do, at least in this context. And it's not that they don't believe those things, and it's not that it's not real, but inside every human being is, of course, also the outside world, the world that shaped them and all the people around them. So to just isolate, the way that people feel or the way they think, put them in some sort of quantum and then try to measure what society is, gets the entire thing backwards. Because materialism is ultimately about the world that we create, our world that we live in, is one not of individuals bouncing around and bouncing off each other and coming up with ideas and enacting them in the world. Materialism is the idea that of the many things that human beings are, perhaps the most important is that we are social animals, that we enter into definite social relations with one another, and that those social relations, material relations, change over time. There are basically there's certain conflicts that exist based on, say, who owns stuff and who has to work for those people. There's certain conflicts in terms of who has political power, who doesn't. And that is far more determinate, I believe, as a materialist, than the random playing out of good or bad ideas in the world, or good or bad psychologies, or authoritarian states of mind versus liberal states of mind. You have to start at the basis, at the material root of it, which are like actual human beings in actual space and actual time doing things and forming relationships, and of course including all of the ways in which any relationship that we can form, any relationship that we do form, is completely overdetermined by the fact that we don't have perfect freedom, that we live, as the Joker said, in a society that we make.
You've been Jokerified. We lost him. We lost Sean.
We got to cut the feed before he says something really edgy.
I'm a historical materialist, and I'm afraid, and I'm tired of hiding it anymore. Now, what was he said in that? I forgot. I tried to do a Joker riff, but I didn't.
What do you get when you give a podcaster a triple whiskey, 3 slices of pizza, and a cup of coffee?
What's that?
What you deserve, which is this.
Whiskey sounds nice right now, but I hope that made sense. Right?
It made sense to me. I mean, that's something I've brought up a lot with friends when talking about philosophy, politics. Not as eloquently, but basically the idea that we do not live in a vacuum and we cannot conduct studies or talk about anything in a way that assumes that we do.
I think the best way to put it is people make history, but not under conditions of their own choosing. And it's the same thing with ideas. It's the same thing with like psychological states. We all, of course, experience them, but we're not creating the conditions that create us. So that to us is the more important thing than simply like people checking off marks on a piece of paper. Do you feel this way? Do you feel that way?
And
The
I never
point is
know how to answer
discover
those
why.
questions because I feel like anything I say is so out of context.
Yeah, that's
By
true
necessity.
too. Yeah, so it's like we have to take into account, definitely people's innate, brain magic, psychology, however these things work, I couldn't tell you. And, human nature as, storytelling apes, wanting to make sense of the world as narratives does seem to be innately human across societies. But like we talked about the medieval people versus the modern people. Like, you're right, we live in a society, and it shapes our beliefs about the world. So our folk wisdom is going to take a certain form, and it's going to have certain objectives and political bents to it, and show certain divisions in society based on the real distribution of power and our relationships to each other.
Hell yeah.
It's not going to be totally psychological. Like I would probably qualify if I took that RWA test as a right-wing authoritarian, but I'm neither authoritarian nor right-wing. That's because my life has taken me in different directions.
Well,
It's not purely from within.
But it's a neat trick though, because what it wants to do, these sorts of studies, is make political positions, make tendencies towards authoritarianism, something that comes merely from inside of people on their personality types. It really wants to isolate that and disregard the conditions that
because if it's innate, we don't have to think about our actions, our ideas, the systems of power going on. And if it's just like, some people are born violently conservative authoritarians, then we don't have to go very deep in there.
Exactly.
We don't have to reach them and explain to them why their worldview we might disagree with it or have something different to offer.
And sorry to interrupt, but it's the same thing they try to do with quote unquote conspiracy theorists, right? There's always this attempt when you posit that, say, the JFK assassination went the other way, that they want to look inside and write people off as crazy. So it's much more convenient to say, oh, you're this obsessive tinfoil hat psycho, than it is to actually look and see if there are alternative explanations, what those might be, and what an alternative says about the kind of world that we live in.
Well, that's how you get the psychiatric abuse in many or even most authoritarian societies. Like, for example, in the Soviet Union, they had this whole disease, this whole descriptor, sluggish schizophrenia, which if you look at the description of it, it like has none of the symptoms of schizophrenia, but it's basically you're agitated and you disagree with the government or you're gay or whatever. And then they would just like pump you full of sedatives.
Right.
If you dissented in a certain way that wouldn't get you sent to jail, they would just give you Vicodin and lock you up.
There's worse fates, but yeah.
Well, having been in quarantine for a few months, I could probably go for some drugs.
Okay, guys, off to the Soviet psychiatric facilities.
But the Soviet example that Abby gave is a perfect one, because in both the here and now and in Soviet society, there were certain things that you had to be crazy to believe. And of course, the things that we believe now about the Soviet Union in retrospect, being for the outside of it, if you had just been plopped into that space, you would have been deemed crazy. You would have got a whole bottle of Vicodin and you would have had your own dungeon to hang out in every day. It's all relative. That's the problem with this psychological explanation, is that different ideas in different places and time are either acceptable or really, really dangerous.
Yeah, and just this one's fun, so we'll just drop this in there real fast. Non sequitur. Schizophrenia is a modern and apparently Western, European influenced mental illness that does not appear in other societies. It would appear to be socially determined by living in our modern market, European society.
I've heard the studies are probably the ones that Jack read. In Africa, people who have sort of delusions and hallucinations, they tend to be much less negative than what we see in Western schizophrenia, and they are more likely to recover or be transient states. Like, what's the term? To run amok comes from a Southeast Asian word for their concept of mental illness, which was amok, which was basically sort of a sort of a temporary psychiatric break.
Oh, interesting.
So it seems like every society has, some sort of condition where you have, hallucinations or sort of a break from reality, but it manifests very differently.
Just like peasant wisdom or conspiracies.
Yeah, and what was 3,000 years ago a man or a woman who heard voices from the outside and was like somewhat deluded and telling wild stories about stuff? It was a holy person. It was somebody possessed by a good or bad spirit. Like,
yeah, culture-bound syndromes are really interesting if anyone wants to read up on those.
Like there was a place to put those people in society. They could be at the temple, but the place we have for them is in the mental asylum wearing a straitjacket.
Well, not after Reagan got done with it. Now it's just the street of jails.
Oh, God,
Boom.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeehaw. Yeah. So where were we kind of back in the conspiracy narrative, you could call it?
Ah, yes. And we've touched on this a little bit, but like I just want to reemphasize the chief thing that makes a conspiracy theory is that it is not considered to be acceptable by whatever the authorities may be. So Anabaptism back in the Reformation days would have probably been something akin to a conspiracy theory that we have today.
Wasn't it just like a like a heterodox view of Christianity?
Well, it was heterodox. That's why they set so many on fire.
All right. I think a conspiracy theory would be more like Luther talking about how, the man in Rome is so crooked, man. We just got to get rid of the man. I think that's more akin. This German monk who just really wants to sleep with nuns, which is what he did. That's one of the first things he did.
That's baller shit. Create a whole religion just so you can sleep with nuns. That's
yeah. Luther's hot nuns. Where were we?
Folks, I have the documents. I'm nailing them up at the church door right now. The Pope in Rome, very bad man.
Oh God, now that's going to be my search history. Martin Luther, hot nuns.
You can buy my brain pills. Made them from mushrooms. $5 a pop.
Alex Jones, Martin Luther is really a dark vision you've.
Oh, that's horrible. Imagine the things Alex Jones would nail to a church.
Oh God!
Would not be theses. It might be feces, but not theses.
It would be like an ad or something.
Coupons to I don't even know who sponsored him. I probably don't want to know.
Colloidal silver.
Force factor 7.
Yeah.
He's just throwing up like water balloons full of colloidal silver at the door. So, are there cases where something has gone from being a conspiracy theory to being so orthodoxly accepted by authorities that it is no longer a conspiracy theory?
Well, that's a real interesting leading question to get us back on track, Abby. COINTELPRO is a good example of that.
I'm actually just the moderator here.
Thank you for moderating. That's supposed to be my job, but I always fall off it.
The gods.
Never put your nose up at a good segue, man. That's podcasting right there.
I'm rooming the segue right now. I'm revving it. I'm intimidating everyone in my segue gang.
Yeah, Abby Mall Cop.
Oh no.
Yeah. So COINTELPRO ran from 1956 to 1979. It was the FBI counterintelligence program. It was revealed in the 70s by the Church Committee, which is going to be real important to our narrative here, because that is the congressional committee that revealed all of the wickedly evil shit that the state was doing after World War II up to the 70s. MKUltra, Stargate, COINTELPRO. They didn't say anything about Fred Hampton, but I think they implied it. All of the crazy stuff that the CIA was doing domestically, which they were not supposed to do, and that the FBI was doing to kind of corral civil society and cut the tall grass as far as dissent goes, was revealed by this committee, and it really broke down trust in the government, chiefly because of COINTELPRO. In which
it turns out people don't like it.
Yeah, the FBI was spying on basically every prominent American political figure for 20 years at the behest of J. Edgar Hoover, and for decades, people.
We did touch on this in the J. Edgar Hoover episode of even people that he just sort of had like petty dislikes of. Like he was very obsessed with taking down Elvis.
Yeah, Elvis the Pelvis was generating American society.
Right. Because actually, I think there is some memo about him making teens too horny, and that was he was so
remember
mad
that.
at the
Oh
he
my
thought that
God.
Elvis was too sexy to live, and he had people spy on Elvis because he was too sexy.
He's too
Oh,
hot
I'm
for
glad.
TV.
I'm glad somebody was on it. That could be pretty dangerous.
Yeah. Although knowing old Hoover, it was probably that Elvis was too black, and that he was mainstreaming too much black culture to the good white kids. 'Cause Hoover
Sounds
was
about
I think he
right.
just wanted creep
not a-
shots of
not a-
Elvis, for the vaults.
Yeah, for my blackmail files, yes.
Blackmail, of course.
Uh,
So,
So-
COINTELPRO and
yeah, the counterintelligence program was meant to do what Sean mentioned earlier and get reds, but it rapidly expanded beyond that mandate, and it was secret, so they could do whatever they wanted to. They spied on, John Lennon, the Nation of Islam, Martin Luther King Jr., who they actually tried to
So
convince
anyone
to
who
commit
is cool.
suicide. They all the cool people,
Yeah, all the good people.
and then also over in the not cool pile, the KKK.
Mm.
I'm
Yeah,
sure
and-
their file was still thinner than Elvis's.
I thought you were going to say, I'm sure there was some good KKK. I was going to go, oh,
God, that sounds like a Trump tweet.
more and more
good people
are
on both
saying
sides.
it. Some very clean bed sheets. But that's not actually the worst thing they did. Who was that author who they were spying on? Was that Hemingway?
Hemingway was one of them. I mean, there's
Yeah.
probably a few.
And
I'm sure all the beats.
Hemingway was driven to basically madness and eventually suicide by what he perceived as basically gang stalking. But it was the FBI literally gang stalking him.
And some of that was hemochromatosis.
That didn't help. Or the
That
alcoholism.
didn't help. It's some people have speculated that's what Trump had. Yeah, basically it's where instead of having too little iron, which is anemia, you've got too much iron and it turns you orange and kind of scrambles your brain.
Huh.
I could go for that.
A materialist explanation for Trump.
Materialist explanation for Trump, Hemingway, yeah.
Yeah. Orange men bad. All of them.
Orange man needs to get his blood tests done.
Yeah.
Oh, I would love to see those results. I bet there's some interesting goo in there. We try not to get too topical on this one because I'm sure that if we ever had an audience, they'd all be libertarians, which I'm cool with. But
I don't know.
roast
I
them
don't
too
know. I don't
hard.
think if they. I think if they listen to a full episode,
You'd be surprised at what people they read what they want to into it. I mean, these guys hate this kind of government tyranny stuff just as much as we.
well,
do.
yeah, it's because they're like, we don't want the police. We want to don't abolish the police, privatize them. We're just gonna call them something else, and it's gonna be entirely different, guys. We swear.
In my
keep
experience, I think you'd be surprised by the how much consensus there is in American society on all of the stuff we're talking about. Whether people consider themselves right wing or left wing, the idea of distrusting the government and knowing that it does subversive and bad things in society, distrusting corporate power, and the media, like these are all almost at least majority positions.
You're right. Yeah, it is mainstreaming. I guess the difference is the libertarians. I guess it's distrusting the government because they are trying to give brownie points to people who aren't white or whatever.
Interfering in what would naturally be a functioning market or something.
Feminism destroying lives.
Which is a deeply conservative ideology, but I don't
Like
want
most libertarians. I could go off on that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
all right.
The funniest,
Special snowflake
They all
Republicans.
turn to alt-right anyways. Libertarians are pretty much gone. They all join the alt-right. And then,
Well, it's like when I looked around in libertarian spaces in high school, and I was like, "Oh, they just hate black people. That's the ideology." But the
hating
free
black
market.
people with more steps.
Yeah, really. I mean, cut out the middleman and just go for it. I mean, be honest about it. Or just be good. I mean, there's two options here.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah,
So
shout out
speaking-
to hearing the Canadians talk about Indigenous people. That's definitely a.
Oh yeah, what they're doing in the Micmac right now is great.
Oh,
That's
God.
really enlightened stuff with those fishermen. And the race war that's being waged. By
Yeah, the
commercial
lobster
fishermen.
race war. That was
Really?
that's an interesting phrase
Yeah.
too.
Really dark stuff, man. Oof.
It's not great.
So speaking of, if anyone
Oh,
listened
yeah,
to this
well, if-
podcast,
Yeah. If you're a commercial fisherman, don't subscribe to our OnlyFans. or whatever the funding mechanism is going to be. Currently, the only listeners are my mom and dad. What's up?
I'm listening.
Hey.
A random acquaintance asked me about the show today, actually, so
Cool.
we're going to cut this part out.
Yeah, this is pathetic. We're not going to say this. I'm doing this for fun. I don't give a shit if people...
It's pronounced Mi'kmaq, actually. Anyway, conspiracies.
Yeah, for those of you out in Radioland, I did the gesture again. The FBI was not only spying on every prominent public figure, they clipped a couple of them, Fred Hampton, the Black Panther, being one of many. Many of the Panthers were driven into exile. And they founded and controlled a right-wing militia called the Secret Army Organization in California, in Southern
That
California.
sounds like something a 7-year-old would come up with. Like they
It
had
was domestic gladio, as usual.
they had their
I am
nephew.
saying this.
It's the Domestic Army Organization.
They were using these like skinhead, like just psycho guys, armed too. They were using them as a proxy against these left-wing and Chicano, farm rights activists in Southern California to surveil and harass them. I don't think they assassinated anyone, but you don't need to tamp that down. So that was a conspiracy theory all through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Everybody was saying, there's something fucked up here. I'm hearing a weird tone when I pick my phone up. There's a car outside my house, which is, that's something that you would say if you were getting schizophrenia. But it also, in some cases, turned out to be true.
Mm.
And I cannot emphasize enough how saying this in the 60s would sound like Art Bell, like tinfoil hat stuff. So it's this stuff has all come out. They admitted to it.
And are we going to touch on, I guess we already kind of have, but sort of the idea of uncertainty? And you have things that before the truth came out sounded absolutely ludicrous, like MK Ultra. A lot of the stuff we talk about in this show, it sounds like they from like Tom Clancy novels. But, then the FOIAs come out and you're looking at this and you're like, okay, if this is the stuff that the government will actually release,
Right.
what about the stuff they're not, what about the stuff that's not being released? Like, good God, if they're admitting to like, putting microphones in Elvis's panty drawer or whatever, then like, what are they still hiding? Good Lord.
Well, and if you guys are familiar with MK Ultra, which was a mind control program with a series of experiments, including many using BZ and LSD. Ted Kaczynski, thank you. All of a sudden, at a certain time, we don't know whether the program stopped because.
Were you thinking Ted Kaczynski?
Yes, Ted Kaczynski at Harvard, right? We know that it stopped at a certain point, and we assume that it stopped because government mind control didn't work. But what if MK Ultra stopped because they got it to work?
Ooh.
And they didn't need to study it anymore. That's
I never thought about that. That's a fun angle.
Yeah, see, I hew more towards the shock doctrine take on that, which is that it was always about torture and that brainwashing has always kind of been a spook.
Yeah, I'd probably come down on that too, but it's fun to think about.
Well, no, it's not. It's not fun to think about at all.
No, you're just,
fun.
we all know Sean is like going to be in the shower just like humming and thinking about MK Ultra and how he's going to waterboard his friends over the weekend. And they're going to inject each other with strange liquids.
Back on the website, away from the nagging wife.
All of that except for the waterboarding probably will happen this week.
I'm sure there's a club in Berlin that'll do that. Like if you put down 50 euros.
Oh, yeah. Consensual, of course.
Yes, consensual MK Ultra by a man named Peter.
Sex
Always
K-
consent to your MK Ultra.
Opening a club in Berlin called Sex K Ultra.
Oh,
sorry, that's bad.
And I like the fact that there was a strip club called Big Sexy Land, and that its sign was viewable from East Germany.
God. That's why the wall fell. They wanted some of that.
Your one glimpse into the West is what sounds like a poor translation of like a Western film from the 80s.
Tear down that wall.
Yeah, we want the Ramones. We want Big Sexy Time. We want all of the good stuff.
No, I always, when I first saw that, I had the horrible thought of Nick Land. And I'm like, no, I don't want Big Sexy Land. Put it back.
No. Fanged Numina, but sexy.
His tell-all memoir, Big Sexy Land.
Oh, God.
Anyway,
I could spend
MK Ultra.
hours talking about how Nick Land sucks and is boring and just writes badly, which makes people think he's cool, but I'm not going to because we have a guest and we got to get this done. So we'll do that. We'll record that when
Another time.
Side
Yeah.
content.
We
Another
can cut it
time.
together.
Bonus episode.
Yeah, you mentioned uncertainty, Abby, and Sean. Maybe MK Ultra continued. That's where the boundary problem gets a little tough. And actually believing in conspiracy theories is probably fine as long as you know that it's a theory and that it's not falsifiable and that you're never going to have any definitive proof of it. That's where I fall down on it.
Yeah, so you're not like that kid I sat near on the bus in high school who all he did was tell people to do acid and talk about how the Freemasons run the whole planet.
Mm.
That's a deep cut.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's some stuff you're just never going to know, and if you resign yourself to that and give up hope of ever truly understanding the world, then go crazy, because maybe Bush did do 9/11. There's no way to know. But if you take
honestly
any further than that, then you get kind of into crazy.
Well, I do think there's some hubris to people who are really into conspiracy theories that it just seems extremely it seems like you're giving yourself too much credit if you think that you can piece together all this top secret stuff and you can explain the world at some point you have to say, well, fuck if I know.
Yeah, exactly. You're like the world historical private detective, connecting all the dots together yourself with stuff you can find in books or on the internet or whatever. It really gives yourself a lot of credit to believe that.
Yeah, like it's not a damn crossword puzzle. You're not going to be able to sit down on the Google with your with your pen and pencil or whatever. And
okay, I have a cork board. I mean, I've got a lot to work with here. No, but the opposite side of the coin is you can't just dismiss something that you don't like or that the TV tells you isn't true as conspiracy theory.
Right.
Because that's just as ignorant. It's like a balanced understanding.
Well, that's like the time I've told, me and Jack have told people about the podcast, and they're like, is this conspiracy theories? And we're like, this is things the government has confirmed. We have the documents.
Folks.
And they're it's just still see the suspicion, this resistance to like something that is public knowledge and publicly confirmed. And if any speculation we put into episodes, we denote as speculation, and still that's too freaky for most people.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of what brought this episode up. I was thinking, like, what makes us different from like Coast to Coast AM or Alex Jones or Sargon or whatever?
It's that we've been koshered in that, we've got.
Well, if we're going to be honest, what makes us different is that we have the documents where they admit to it. That legitimates it in the eyes of most people
and us, because as someone who's currently partaking in studies, all I do is write papers, and I've just had it hammered into my brain so hard that you need a good source, and it can't be like a green text. It can't be like someone's like GeoCities from 1998 with the acid green background.
Well, there's a whole other kind of meta analysis. I think it's kind of the way that I look at it is that if we know in certain instances, COINTELPRO and MK Ultra being two of the really big ones, that there is this dense network of power, governmental power and private power, that exists subterranean at all times, that's capable of doing a COINTELPRO or MK Ultra. It's perfectly reasonable then to look at the world around us today or look at recent history and speculate what else could be applying those same methods and those same networks in order to cause subversion, in order to change people's minds, or in order to change events. Like once it's revealed that one of them is true and that real historical actors did it and there were real consequences, it's perfectly reasonable for us to open up that door and say, like, well, what else?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong at all with looking at the world around you honestly, saying, holy shit, and then kind of coming up with your own explanation, whatever that may be. I mean, I think everyone does that to some certain degree, consciously or not.
And to talk about humans as social animals, just in our day-to-day relationships, we lie and we manipulate all the time. No one's shocked if someone's like, oh, my girlfriend cheated on me, or oh, I lied to her, or my parents think that I've had a job for the last 2 or 3 months. We can be so deceitful and manipulative just among everyday interactions, maybe between, the dozen of people we talk to frequently, but people can't apply that to a larger society, the larger community.
Oh, and I have a great sort of paraphrase from Michael Parenti, Who King?
Oh, King shit. Go ahead.
King. I can't do his voice. I tried. I practiced the voice, but I can't do it. There's a real crime called conspiracy. It's on the books. You can look it up. People go to prison all the time for conspiracy to do this, conspiracy to do that. It comes from the Latin word conspire, to breathe together, to share a secret plan and then do something. Conspiracies are real. And you have to ask yourself, well, if people have conspiracy theories that the world is run effectively by small groups of people who conspire in secret to make world-changing decisions, then, okay, I mean, what's the opposite of that? A somnambulance theory, that the powerful and rich just sleepwalk, into their wealth and power, and they don't do anything to maintain it or increase it.
Right.
And that things just kind of happen at random. There's no cause to an effect.
Or sort of like how when we're talking about, the idea of right-wing authoritarians or whatever,
things just happen.
Well, no, it's sort of like when you see like the QAnon people and such, in people who are right-wing conspiracy theorists in general, it's like they're so close, like they can't admit to, like, it's like you guys just stumbled across class differences.
Yeah, of course, and the Parenti bit goes on.
But they can't say
Of course, all of the rich people know Epstein. There are so few of them. They all work together. Right. They're colleagues. They're all married to each other. They've all been in and out of government and private organizations and NGOs. They talk with each other. They have conference calls. Of course, there are small groups of people making these decisions that change our lives. It's called a boardroom.
Right.
They meet on the carousel out on the DC Mall. No, they have a room. They go and they conspire. But it's a conspiracy to plan the economy, which would be our Q3 estimate for Goldman Sachs or something like that. Or what's our plan to deal with Iran if they want to close the Straits of Hormuz?
A lot of the wacky stuff is people who are too dense to understand the idea of class and people having class interests.
That the whole thrust of this episode, though, is that they're not dense. They're smart. They're trying to understand the world that they live in.
Or I shouldn't say dense. Short. Perhaps not dense. Maybe thick. Can I call them thick?
Thick description?
Yes. Right-wing authoritarians are thick. Not quite dense, but they're thick. God.
I think branching off of the Parenti bit, I think that it is certainly true that a small group of people have a preponderance of power in the world, and we know that those people are ultimately the capitalists and like the politicians and people in think tanks and definitely boards of directors. But
aren't all think tanks money laundering?
Some of them are influence peddling.
I think on a deeper, more fundamental level, though, when Marx talked about flipping Hegel's idealism on its head, he talked about finding the rational kernel within the metaphysical shell of his theory. Ooh. And I think one rational kernel within the metaphysical shell of a lot of these conspiracy theories is not just that there are small groups of individuals with a preponderance of power, but also that the fundamental thesis of the conspiracy theory, which is that we are not in control of our lives, that forces outside of us determine so much of what we do, and that those are ultimately inhuman, malevolent forces, is fundamentally correct. It's just that the way that operates is not through shadowy conspiracies or through, Judeo-Bolshevism or whatever. It's from the operation of the law of value in a capitalist economy where our social relationships are dictated by the inhuman compulsion to have to accumulate capital to make profits no matter what the consequences are. And we're all, in a sense, beholden to an outside force and an outside power, but it's not a conspiracy. It's called the market.
Yeah, it's a society of little conspiracies interlocking and bouncing off each other.
But on a deeper level, though, the conspiracy theorizing takes the real feelings of powerlessness and the real compulsion of the market. And instead of looking at it clearly, instead of looking at it and say capitalism is the root cause of these problems, because people lack the analysis, the wherewithal to understand it in materialist terms, they have to turn it into something larger, something metaphysical, something that is more understandable because it puts actual people in control. Like, that's the thing, is I think that folks are scared to understand the deep structural nature of world society and realize at the end that nobody's actually in charge, right? That even the capitalists themselves are being compelled to do this by the law of value and the need to accumulate capital. So I think it's a reflection of a real dynamic that exists under capitalism, and people turn it into this sort of metaphysical, conspiracizing take, because we're not prepared to even confront for ourselves how ultimately powerless we are in the face of capital.
And that's such a good explanation of where this comes from. I gotta say, I more or less agree with that. That's where I've been coming from. It's also, it's not even that just that people don't have the framework to understand like the structural and materialist nature of the world that we live in. It's that not only do people not want to explain that to you, except for cool indie podcasts, but people actually can profit. They're compelled by the market sometimes to find any way they can make money. And so you get Alex Jones, who makes money off of mystifying this shit and filling your head with nonsense about how it's psychic vampires and pedophiles drinking child blood, which, tell me how that's not the blood libel, but just from libs.
Right.
And that further muddies the waters of people not only trying to understand the world that they live in, but lacking a material critique or an understanding of the world that they live in, but people trying to fuck with them.
I agree. And I think that on another level too, there's something deeply social about the conspiracy theories and their creation and their propagation, which is that in a world such as we live now, where despite the proliferation of many different websites, many different social media platforms, a million fucking commercials, the view of the world that's given to us is still very, very monolithic. So when people come up with these alternate theories for how an event happened or about how the world works, they immediately find a community, you can call it, of other people who they can share these ideas with and bounce them back and forth, do sleuthing in books or on the internet, come up with their own ideas, and basically create a social community of like-minded people where they don't feel so alienated because you're all doing conspiracy together.
Well, I think that saying, "Oh God, I thought it was just me. Oh, so I'm not crazy." I think that's one of the best bonding feelings. Even when something like a coworker being like, "Hey, is it me or is our boss insane?" And you're like, "I thought it was just me." That is immediately it's you two against the rest of the office.
Right.
Yeah.
That is such a base part of, I think, how we socialize.
That's solidarity. I mean, it's you also think that the vampires run the world? Wow, it's crazy, man. Me too. We should talk. We should talk sometime.
And then you bring up the other context of, say, JFK, and it comes as Western capitalist society is the most prosperous generally, that it's ever been in human civilization. But at the same time, all of these compulsions of the market, all of the compulsions of labor, all of the focus on mass consumption, individual mass consumption, and individual home ownership is leading to a type of society that's never existed before, where people are more and more estranged from one another, estranged from those sort of folk ways we were talking about and folk knowledges, and kind of left on their own to try to figure out what the hell is happening in the world. So I think it's too a reflection of modernity, in the sense that we've all been disembedded from these sort of communities and these group knowledges that we had.
The hyper-atomized world.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, this is what you said is the very reason that I'm studying urban planning. Just the idea that the physical world around us, it shapes and is shaped by our values. It shapes how we think, how we feel. I could take all the research about the negative health, negative psychological effects of sprawl, not even getting into hyperconsumption and the environmental effects. But just little things like it's crazy. To harp on our generation or whatever, but how common it was for our grandparents' generation to know how to sew, how to cook complex meals, how to fix cars. And that's not like me being like, oh, millennials, Gen Z are lazy. It's that we just simply weren't taught that.
Right.
We don't need to know what you buy that stuff.
Yeah,
Those
you know,
are
you
all
To
buy
make more
clothes.
money and buy it. Yeah.
You can consume all those things, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why the hell should we be taught in school to sew? You know, I have a shirt that I made out of 3 old pairs of pants. When, you know, you could just go down to the mall and get something from H&M.
Right.
Abby, didn't you make like a pair of shoes out of jeans or something?
Yeah, I made a pair of shoes out of jeans.
God.
I made a shirt out of 3 pairs of dress pants.
Abby just sends me this picture of like these jean slippers one day. Just
Oh, yeah,
out
the
of blue.
Jillipers.
And this cursed image of them like on the floor with like a pool of light around them, like they're being questioned by
got
some
those.
kind of private eye.
I
And
put
it's just
those
like,
on
what
my-
the fuck is this? Why would you do this?
I put that on one of my social media stories, and people I hadn't heard from since high school were asking me why.
Yeah, it's awful. Why the fuck? Oh, I've got some denim underwear. You want to try this out? I think it's your size. It's disgusting. No, God.
I'm sorry, now you've planted that in my head.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Hey, you guys, you really dodged a bullet because I couldn't figure out how to ventilate through this, but I was going to take this old pair of pleather skinny jeans, like pleather pants, and make a mask out of them for COVID.
If you make a COVID mask out of pleather, I'll ventilate you.
Deservedly.
Well, that's what I'm going to wear to that German MK Ultra bar. They're in my leather mask. Please waterboard me.
You look like Immortan Jane.
Oh. But yeah, you see, when I make shoes out of an old pair of jeans, that's a pair of shoes I'm not buying.
Mm-hmm.
You're reducing, reusing, and recycling.
And a skill that I'm not on the clock when I sew.
Yeah, you should turn that into from a hobby into a gig. Get on Etsy. Monetize that shit.
Become a maker.
Yeah, Abby, stop being a taker. Stop being one of the 47%, Abby.
Oh yeah, I need to. And the 47% of Americans who just sit around all day sewing shoes out of jeans.
And
Well, I'm
that's
glad that
interesting
slippers upset you that much. I'm honored.
I just don't like it. It's visceral. The feeling of jeans on my feet. I just don't like it. I would have to wear socks under them, which defeats the purpose.
Go on.
Sorry,
You just need to make socks out of underwear then.
Oh no.
No, I'm not even going to go there.
I will do it. But you're right. Hyperatomized society, speaking of Jillipers,
or atomized by the Jillipers. That's really the cause of anomie and high levels of external locus of control beliefs.
well, time's an illusion. Everything's happening at once, and the moment that started it all were the Jillipers. Because of the Jillipers, Caesar was stabbed. Because of the Jillipers, Kaliningrad fell. Because of the Jillipers.
Jillipers did 9/11.
The Jillipers, yeah, there were 2 of them.
Ooh.
As I told that customer today very happily, it's 9/11.
At some point, after the fall of the American Empire and the afterscape, people are going to say that as a holiday greeting, 9/11 will become the harvest holiday of the next society. They'll remember that it was important, but they won't remember why. Like, hey, salutations, 9/11 to you, sir.
That's sort of like
Like that.
Easter, everyone with little bunnies and collecting eggs and stuff, and they tell you the actual Easter story, and you're like, fuck, that's dark.
Yep.
Why am I in a pink dress right now?
I have never heard or seen such outrageous, vicious, distorted reporting in 27 years of public life.
I regret to inform you that the boys are back in town.
I'm one of the boys. I'm back too.
Oh, right on. Okay. Well, we're back from our 5-minute break, sponsored by
Wraith.
sponsor company.
By Alex Jones.
Action. Yeah.
So Abby's gonna read us a little selection from our delightful Crack Ops Internet Archive
I have been
the
plunged
disaster of the
into
MS
darkness.
Estonia.
I am
Abby has
so
become
excited for this.
Every time I close my eyes at night, I am plunged into the bottom of the Baltic Sea on a cold autumn morning in 1994.
I am ready to get based in Estonia-pilled.
Yeah, I think that just means that you generate your own Wi-Fi.
I think the Estonia-pill is just liking saunas. I believe that's the Estonia-pill.
The Estonia-pill is their national dish. Fuck. I'm sorry.
No, actually, we're not cutting that. The great thing is I'm going to edit this one, so I know what we're not going to cut.
Why can't I say words? All right, that was a Freudian slip. Their national dick is called, it's called Peak Boys, which just
We
means
have nationalized it.
which just means long boy. And the first time I heard that, I was cackling. I told everyone I know that in Estonia they eat long boy.
It's like long pig, but younger.
It's like veal.
Right.
Well, it's actually, they got it wrong. It's not the Jews, it's the Estonians that eat the babies. I'm sure, all 500 of them are going to be very angry when I say that.
Oh, that's anti-aesthetic. I guess it would be.
Terroristskolia. Anyway, so overview. The MS Estonia was a passenger liner that sunk in the middle of the Baltic, sort of between Estonia, Sweden, and Finland in September 28th, 1994. So it was a ferry, but it's not what we think of as a car ferry. It's basically just a cruise liner that has a car deck. And if you know anything about car decks, they make things extremely prone to sinking.
Yeah, it's like a roll-on, roll-off cargo ship. If you've ever seen one of those that carries cars,
the front opens up.
People drive into it. They strap the car down. You get out and you go gamble or whatever.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was they call them ro-ro ferries. So big old boat. Where do I even start with this? So there were 989 people aboard that night. The ship went down. The visor, which is basically the door of the roll-on, roll-off area, the door to the car deck, it ripped off. It was stormy, inclement weather. So it came off, and the ship went down in like 35 minutes. Because the thing about a car deck is it's just a big cavernous space, just ready to be filled with water.
Ugh.
And the light that says whether or not the visor was open said that it was closed, and from the crew cockpit you can't see the visor. So they were really confused to what was happening. It was way too late when they noticed that the visor had come off. So the ship went down in 35 minutes. 852 people died, and
oh my god.
Yeah, it was the worst maritime disaster in peacetime since the Titanic. Only like 130 survived.
Oh.
So yeah, like 2/3. That was only like maybe a third of the whole ship. So yeah, it's very bad. It's like the Nordic 9/11. Not really in the geopolitical sense, but if your country only has 1 million people like Estonia or like 5 million like places like Finland, this was basically equivalent of like a small town just being swallowed by the sea.
Right.
Yeah. By equivalent population, it was actually worse than 9/11 for these.
Yeah, by equivalent population, so like 250 Estonians died. That's the equivalent of 70,000 Americans dying.
Oh man.
Just fractions. I'm proud of the math I did on that.
Yeah, good work, Abby. The
Thank you.
Numbers are with you for this one.
Math is good for something.
Yeah, if you've seen me try to do recipes anyway. So there's a lot. I basically wrote a book report on this because that's what I do. I will go on autopilot and write 3 pages of notes.
Yeah, Abby goes into a fugue state and begins to write summaries of 3 books that she's read in 10 hours. Yeah,
I'm like the Manchurian Candidate, but with data. There's
definitely less productive ways to fugue.
It's very productive. So about 1 a.m., survivors report hearing loud metallic banging noises. These went on kind of on and off for 10 minutes. Actually, fun fact, the people in the cheap seats were more likely to survive because they couldn't sleep through this, and they were up on the top decks trying to figure out what was going on.
Oh, interesting. So it's like the opposite of Titanic.
Yeah. Because if you were down near the car deck, you weren't sleeping through that. 1:15, the visor of the ship was torn off by wind and waves. And within like 5 or 10 minutes, the listing was 60 degrees, which is almost on its side.
Oh, man.
So it took on water and just fell over.
Yeah, it just, basically. A lot of people didn't really notice anything was seriously wrong until this ship started listing that way. And at that point, like, look at any room you are in now, and the walls are now the floor and ceiling.
And
Not good.
This was not like a military ship. It's a cruise liner, basically. So it has things like refrigerators, vending machines,
God.
chairs, and they were not bolted to the deck.
So a lot of people were just crushed by like bars and vending machines and stuff. If you've ever been in the corridors of a ferry, they're very narrow. So now you, once that turns to its side, I could probably walk through that. Most people probably couldn't.
Yeah.
The short shall inherit the earth.
Short queens, short kings.
Man, let's rise up.
Yeah, we're here. Yes, this is, although, that's not going to be true by the end of this disaster. So everything that went wrong, everything that could have gone wrong did. Basically, as soon as people noticed something was wrong, it was like a race, pretty much to the top deck, the part of the boat that like wasn't underwater. Because the thing is, when a boat lists that far, in this case at least, the windows start to break.
Oh, man.
Because, that's the thing about cruise ships and passenger ferries is, military ships, they're kind of prepared for this.
Well, they don't have windows. Everything's bolted down. Everyone is trained in performing a disaster response activity, and everybody's got life jackets. They know where they are. They know how to escape from the ship in the event of 3 to 4 different disasters. Civilians who are meant to be on a cruise ship for 3 hours just kind of hope that nothing goes wrong, because then the life jackets are locked up. The staff might just be high teenagers. If something goes wrong, you're kind of fucked. I mean, how do I get out of here? I don't know.
In the Estonia's case, I mean, the staff, there's staff as in you could be a bartender or you could be a captain. It seems like everyone was like as well trained. It was more issues with the engineering of the boat. It's probable the visor came off because of faulty welding. And then you have sort of things that you saw, such as most of the life jackets were missing straps, or they were all bunched and tied together. Or I'm pretty sure I heard some of the containers that hold them were painted shut.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Disaster.
You get stuff like things not being bolted down. Let's see. So by 1:32, so only like 15 minutes after the visor comes off, the engines had cut out. You start to lose electricity. So basically this ship just filled up and went down very quickly in a way that few people physically could escape.
And those that did were really in for it, because it was the middle of the night in the Baltic, which is a very cold sea.
In late September.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
For them, it's winter.
So it's basically it's winter. It's cold. It's dark. If you can listen to the distress signals sent out by the the crew, and the thing was, because at some point they lost most of the electricity. I don't know quite how backup generators work on the ships, but they're on the radio, and the Baltic, it's a busy shipping lane they were on. But the Silja Europa, which was the first ship they called, they couldn't tell the Silja Europa where they were, like their coordinates.
Oh, they didn't.
You can
have
send
GPS,
up some flares, but it's dark.
Was this pre-GPS, or did they just have it a malfunctioning unit?
94. I think this was pre-GPS, but I mean, there are ways that you could. I mean, it's still used coordinates before that.
Well, they would have had to triangulate with the ground radio stations and stuff.
Yeah, and by the time somebody thought maybe to do that, they were probably listing at 60 degrees and.
Most certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they didn't really get like an effective distress call off.
And there was it's like the distress call also didn't fit the international sort of form. So I think a lot of the ships around were just confused.
They were just like yelling into the radio, like, "Oh my god!"
It's more like if you listen to it, it's more like we have a problem. Mayday, Silja Europa, we have a problem.
They have a German captain of we have a bit of a problem here.
God. So like I could go on, but basically, fun fact about ships, you saw this with the Costa Concordia in 2012-11, I think, which I do remember happening, which is once a ship flips sideways, you're fucked.
It's not good.
Just you hope you're on the right part of the ship that you could actually get up. Oh yeah, so we were talking about how cold it was on the Baltic. And the thing was, if you did get out of the ship, something like a third of the people who got out of the ship still died because it's cold, the waves are heavy, the lifeboats were faulty, or there wasn't really a good way to launch them from like the side.
A ship on its side. Yeah, no.
Like, they were not designed for that. So yeah, it's basically the worst disaster you could think of on a boat.
Yeah, don't think about it happening to you. You'll dream about it. It's not good.
It's very bad. Also, fun fact, women and children first with the Titanic, only time that's happened. Something like only like 30 of the 130 survivors were women, and that's because you need just like pure physical brawn to like pull yourself up the hallways that are flipped over.
Right.
I don't think it's a coincidence that the one interview I saw with the female survivor, she was a dancer who worked as an entertainer on the ship because, you know, dancers are all ripped.
Yeah, and I think that muscle tone also helps you hold heat, but don't hold me to that because I wouldn't know. I'm a podcast.
Well, yeah, and also once you are out on the waves, a smaller body is a huge liability because of hypothermia and, like, you know, swimming against the waves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the long and short of it, so let's not get too down in the dumps and just be like, oh, fuck, they all died.
Yeah, no, but that's...
that's a dark story, man.
It's like a really fucked up situation. It's very, very, like, as far as the psychological effect on the survivors and on the countries that suffered this, it was like 9/11, which is why Abby is just totally down the rabbit hole at this point. She's lost, but why I'm
she's e-pilled.
The most Lovecraftian. It's the most Lovecraftian disaster I've ever read about.
It's so fucked. We're not going to read the survivor stories. I have to sleep tonight.
Oh no, yeah, please don't.
But
I don't have anything to drink.
Because, you know, at least with 9/11, I want to see at least on 9/11, but, like, there's something just so demoralizing about being crushed by a slot machine.
Yeah.
And falling to the bottom of the Baltic.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, like, there's a lot of stories with 9/11 about how cooperation helped people survive, but with the MS Estonia, you didn't really have, like, that, I guess, catharsis of reading those stories, because if you helped people, you didn't get out of the boat.
That's a very European disaster too.
Oh.
Yeah, there are no hero stories, no firefighters. It's cold. They all died.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's definitely heroes. We're just like not going to hear about. We're not going to hear from them.
Right. Their stories went down with the ship.
Yeah.
And then just like 9/11, what the disaster revealed was a lot of defects, bad processes, bad engineering, and it's like ripped off enough Band-Aids from this ship that was obviously being held together by toothpicks and gum that people started to get real suspicious. So it's actually a good example for Americans to look at of people who they don't care about and something they've never heard of, but the same conspiracy process that went into 9/11. The reason that we have 9/11 truth is really the same reason that folks over there have what Abby's going to talk about, which is MS Estonia truth.
Aha.
All right.
They've taken an e-pill
for those
too.
in Radioland, I'm doing my stretching. All right, I'm squaring up, taking a sip of water. Okay. Official cause, bow visor failure, which is true. They found the bow visor just sort of floating out. Well, even survivors remember seeing the ship and being like, oh, where'd the front go?
Ooh, that'll do it.
That'll do it.
Hate when that happens.
Yeah, you need that part.
Which isn't a very satisfying thing. So the investigation, where to start with this?
Imagine the most suspicious stuff that these countries could possibly have done and then make it a little bit more suspicious.
Because I'm like, should I start in the timeline of what was happening in that part of the world, or should I start on the timeline of the investigation?
I'll just do the investigation. Here, quick primer, this was 90s Europe. Estonia and the other Baltic countries were
recently independent
recently
from the Soviet Union.
Post-Soviet. The area was frankly an economic fucking disaster, and the shipping was all in bad shape from lack of maintenance. And then you had this interplay between the NATO countries and the former Warsaw Pact countries who either wanted to join NATO or not join NATO, and this and that and the other thing.
So the investigation basically said, bow failure. After the sinking, there was the 1995 Estonia Agreement, so this would have been signed a few months later. So it was a treaty that was signed by Estonia, Sweden, and Finland as the contracting parties, and it forbids the disturbance of the site. Basically, the agreement says if someone from your country goes down and like dives into the site or tries to take something or whatever, you have to hold them legally responsible.
Which is interesting because generally with maritime law, you are allowed to salvage. Generally speaking, the Baltic might be a different.
And it was very vague. Like we're gonna have the link in the description, but it's like a 2-page UN document.
Yeah, and it's meant, theoretically, they say it's meant to stop basically grave robbing.
But it also says that the signatory countries cannot raise the wreck.
Which is sus, to say
Sus as hell.
Yeah, that's pretty sus.
What's even more sus as hell is a couple years after the sinking, so the ship went down in Swedish waters, and for context, among the passengers, about half most were Swedish, a good chunk were Estonian. So this is mostly between Estonia and Sweden because the ship was going from Tallinn to Stockholm.
Cool.
Anyway, the Swedish government was like, we have a really great idea, and we think the families of the victims are going to love it. What if we covered the wreck in a concrete shell?
Oh, fuck. Like Chernobyl.
Yeah.
What if we covered the elephant's foot? And by that we mean the one surviving door.
A $45 million project. I don't even know what that is in 2020 money, but that's a big number. It's, I'm pretty sure more than what it would take to actually raise up the wreck from a very shallow waters.
Honestly.
So, there's nothing sketchy there. They started dumping gravel onto the wreck, and the families were like, what the fuck are you doing? Please stop. And they did.
They stopped. Good. Okay.
To their credit, they did not encase the MS Estonia. A crime, it's basically a crime scene.
Yeah, let's put 25,000 tons of gravel onto this ship to cover what? And this is where the wheels start turning in people's heads. I mean, it's really weird. And there's a logical explanation for all of it, but there's also a more interesting explanation. So,
there's a new documentary that's come out, which we're going to get to, but they interviewed the British divers who were contracted to sort of go down and look at the wreck. And the divers were saying things like, yeah, it wouldn't have been hard to bring the wreck up. It wouldn't have even been hard to bring the bodies up.
And the Baltic is not known for being a very wide or deep sea. It's
So what are they trying to hide?
Exactly.
Yeah. So they were saying
this
is really strange. They recovered like 90 bodies, but it was more like they were already outside of the ship where they'd washed up. So it's still down there, and no one's supposed to touch it or look at it or.
No,
really not investigate it. You're not allowed to investigate it.
No.
Yeah, if you're from a signatory nation, you are legally not allowed to investigate.
Actually, a German journalist about 10 years ago had an independent team go down there and look at some things, which we'll get into later. And she still has a warrant out in Sweden. If she goes to Sweden, they will arrest her.
Whoa. Gangster.
They are not, they're not fucking around about that.
Thought the Swedes were nice. Guess not.
The Sami would have something to say about that.
Yeah.
Scandinavia is up there with with Canada, as far as like.
And what about the natives of what did they call it? New Finland or something? They colonized some part of North America, right? Like Delaware, right?
Yeah.
New Sweden.
Christiana, Delaware. Yeah.
Yeah. Joe Biden is a squarehead, right?
Yeah, we
something like that.
So speaking of things that are shifty, in 2004, also we'll link this, it was confirmed by the Estonian government and apparently the Swedish government, I couldn't find that document in English, that the ferry had been used to carry non-explosive military equipment before.
Oh.
Yeah.
The last instance was about a week before the sinking.
Which is further a bit sus.
Yeah.
And this is post-Soviet Europe. I mean, 94, the gold rush was still on in these post-Soviet countries.
Well, yeah, I mean, Russia was was having its, copper pipes ripped out.
It was getting Yeltsined.
Right.
Yeah, it was being thoroughly Yeltsined. Tiny Russia Yeltsined by two thick NATO jocks. I don't know.
I saw where you were going. That was good.
something gang banged by IMF. I don't know.
And this is more of
Polish
conjecture
trade
because
union destroyed.
this is more conjecture.
If you've seen Lord of War, you're thinking, oh, Nicolas Cage is shipping crates of Kalashnikovs out of the Baltic states to some place else for shipment to Ethiopia.
Yeah, that's what I would assume.
So sus.
Apparently, I'm saying apparently because this is another thing that I can't really confirm because I can't find things in English for it. But apparently Russia had kind of asked Estonia, can you not do this? Selling our old military technology overseas. We're not a fan. We don't like this.
That makes sense. Just don't want to go out freelancing with all that Soviet stuff.
Yeah. Well, you guys say that, but look, Sweden needed an economic boost at the time. Oil was low, and there are brave freedom fighters in Central Africa who needed that weapon.
I think I'm going to watch God of War now that you mentioned that film. I'm looking up to see if I can rent it.
Isn't that
Lord
the bad
of War
video
or
game
God
with...
Lord of War.
Lord of War.
It's honest, on God, Nick Cage made a really good movie.
He's also really good in Color Out of Space. I saw that over the weekend.
Huh, no shit.
I haven't seen this in years, but I'm gonna do it after we pod. But go on. I'm sorry.
Speaking of Nick Cage, so this came out. Interestingly enough, it's not. Well, I mean, these governments didn't just come out and say this. It was because a Swedish customs agent told the media about this, and Sweden and Estonia were kind of like, "We will investigate ourselves thoroughly," and then they came back 5 minutes later and were like, "Yeah, we put military property onto civilian."
A military property involved smuggling. It has been investigated by Internal Affairs. We have been found not guilty.
Well, they found themselves. They did admit to it, which makes you wonder. Like, that's the whole thing of if that's what they admit. Good Lord, what are they not admitting?
Well, because that's another thing about the conspiracy theorizing we were talking about all episode is that invariably, not invariably, but so often these conspiracies are about forces within the government doing one thing or the other. And of course, who's going to be the one that actually investigates and who actually puts the imprimatur on it? It's always going to be the government. So it's like almost always in every case, like only the government itself can tell you if the government itself is bad. And that's just sketchy on its face.
Yeah, and it's no wonder that I'm immediately going to conspiracy land with this stuff. It's rather sus.
My favorite part about the covering up with the concrete and gravel is that the company that built the ship, the German company Meyer Werft, they actually spoke out against this, saying that it was, difficult to understand since it would, quote, inevitably destroy evidence into a pending proceeding.
This thing, I'm sitting here doing Minecraft villager noises right now. This is very, very interesting.
Just this private company that made this ship is like telling the Swedish government, like, why would you destroy the evidence? We want to investigate our possible failure.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so you can see where people's brains went fucking crazy with this, like, placed bodies, people disappearing and then reappearing later. I mean, bomb threats.
That's uncertainty. So the thing is, when almost 1,000 people go down with the ship or escape or are missing, a lot of conspiracy theories came from the fact that every time a survivors versus, decedents list was put out, there'd be different names in different places. And people read way too far into what was, we couldn't find a body, or we assumed this person had survived, but there was a miscommunication and they did not.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, like the stuff with the similar thing happened with the hijackers.
Yeah.
A lot of speculation.
Yeah, and that's sort of the issue, especially when you don't recover bodies, or you have situations where certain family members would be like, oh, well, my daughter's alive because multiple people saw her in a raft getting out of the ship, not really taking into account that she probably fell was knocked off of the life raft. I mean, a lot of people died in the life rafts.
Ugh.
Yeah.
That's really sad.
So they cling to it, I mean, as a way to salve the pain of that, definitely.
And where would they think that those people would go? They'd be abducted by the the Estonians or something?
Well, the perfidious Lithuanians are always at work.
Right.
We must guard against the perfidious Lithuanian scourge.
You guys joke, but it's a big conspiracy theory that the captain of the ship, Avo Pitt, is still alive, or he survived.
Ooh, like Elvis.
Like Elvis. Yeah, they think he's alive in Cuba.
I heard he actually died on the shitter.
Yeah,
Many years after that.
There's the theory that he survived the wreck and then was kidnapped or either put under a new name or something, or he saw too much.
I just think it was strange that there was a Kentucky colonel running his captaining career, who then got him killed.
You don't see that often.
Diet pills. Yeah, it's very weird. Yeah. Sus.
There's the conspiracy that the visor was removed after the ship went down to mislead the public. And so you have all of this absolutely wacky stuff about faking deaths, Avo Pitt being under an assumed identity in the U.S., where, as a Estonian sea captain, he would fit in great.
Oh, yeah, it would be just like Better Call Saul. He'd blend right in.
So it's reverse Lilyhammer.
He went to America to join the Italian mob to hide from his.
There's my favorite conspiracy theory because it's just dumb, which is that something was being smuggled on the ship, and that they opened the visor mid-journey to try to push something out into the sea and get rid of it.
Oh.
That's a really bad plan. Why would they think people would try that?
I don't know, why would you, if something's valuable enough to smuggle, why would you get cold feet and dump it into the Baltic in a way that invariably will bring the ship down?
That's dry stooges. Yeah.
I get it. That's good.
The three comrades.
I tried. I don't speak Russian, so it had to be German. Which I totally do speak, not just 5 words.
Oh,
So what would you say, Abby, if you had to hazard a guess at how many people in that region believe these theories? Because in America, conspiracy belief is we say it represents heterodox belief. Everyone believes in conspiracy theories. It's
at least one.
Yeah,
everyone believes in at least one. And think about how many people believe in either Russiagate or Epstein or,
because as we all know, Epstein isn't real. He was never.
He didn't.
No,
he never existed.
Or really counterposed the Antifa freak out on the one hand, conspiracy versus the Russiagate on the other, and these are completely mainstream. You'll see them in on cable news every single night. We're all conspiracy theorists now.
Well, it's hard for me to gauge. I'd say it's fairly common, especially now for reasons I'm about to get into, to think that something shifty is going on. I asked my one Estonian friend, and he was like, "I wasn't born yet."
Wow, I don't have any Estonian friends. I thought I lived in a cosmopolitan city.
Yeah.
Abby is the most rootless of the cosmopolitans.
I am the rootless Protestant cosmopolitan that they warned you. God. Oh man. Yeah, so it's very hard for me to gauge. Here, so you have the full spectrum though. You have Avo Pitt, not Arvo Part, that is a composer. You have Avo Pitt is alive in California. We've got the Swedish government kidnapped this bartender because she saw too much. It was a Russian torpedo. And then we have the events of a couple months ago.
Oh.
This is still a big story, huh? Wow.
Let's say the scab just reopened because the Discovery Channel made a documentary. It's in Swedish. It's only really being shown in Northern Europe, where they actually sent a diving team down. They flew a German flag off the ship, so there's nothing really those countries can do about it. They sent some cameras down, and they found a 14-inch hole.
What?
They found a hole in the hull that was never noted in any of the investigative documents.
Oh my God! Holy shit!
A big old nasty one, really.
14-inch holes. That's pretty sizable.
Could it have happened after it went down?
Hit a rock on the bottom.
Hit a rock or something.
That was kind of what I was wondering. It seems like it's kind of more of a sandy, silty area, though I can't really confirm that. That's one theory. But it is worth noting that that's not what the governments of those countries thought. They heard about this and immediately reopened the case.
Oh.
Because you
So
do
as of
have
right
to
now,
think,
it's reopened?
yeah, so you do have to think, though, that the generation that's in power now, I mean, the people who were running the show in 1994 aren't there now.
Well,
Right.
in America, they certainly are, and they just won't die. But yeah, over in Europe, they turn over.
We have more of a gerontocracy than they have over there. So.
Yeah. So they could have pretty easily just said, well, it probably fell on a rock. But it does mean something to me, at least, that this is being thoroughly looked into. To the point that one of the top ministers in Estonia has publicly said that he thinks that a submarine hit the boat.
Ooh.
Wow.
Because, and Abby and I have talked a little bit about this. Russia's submarine fleet was still active during the 90s, the submarines they inherited from the Soviet Union. But they were in incredibly poor repair, and they were being operated by skeleton crews of undertrained conscripts who were not following procedures, to say the least.
So a submarine hitting it with a torpedo or like bumping into it?
Bumping into it, because there's been a few other incidents. There was the Whiskey on the Rocks incident in the early 80s.
I love that one.
Because no one got hurt, and it's a fun pun. Basically, a Russian submarine from the Whiskey class of subs ran aground in, I think, Sweden or Norway.
Oh, I've heard of this. Go on, yeah.
And actually, in the early 90s, once in 1992 and then once, I think, in 93, there's two different incidents of Russian subs running into other submarines in either the Baltic or sort of the Arctic.
Yeah, because those areas, in theory, if submarines were to go there, they would see many naval installations and missile bases. So there were possibly, in theory, a lot of submarines in those areas.
So there's precedents for this.
Boris Yeltsin wasn't the only one drinking back in the 90s in Russia. Shit.
I'd have a nice stiff drink if I'd live in 90s Russia too. So
shit.
Especially a 90s Russian submarine. Holy shit.
Yeah, and then there was
I'd
the
be throwing
Kursk
back
disaster.
bottles.
Yeah.
There's the Kursk disaster in 99. So yeah, they were. I texted Jack. I described 90s Russian Navy as messy bitches, which I know is going to offend all of the Russian veterans that listen to Crack Ops. But
and all the messy bitches that listen.
All the messy bitches of Crack Ops. It had to be said. I would never. I know it really hurts as a messy bitch to be compared to the Russian Navy in the 1990s.
Yeah, just don't call them Russians. Yeah.
So there's precedents for this, and talking to some people who, have a background in the Navy, it's worth noting that most submarines in the Baltic are Russian. I mean, the Russians have always been into like little diesel subs and such, and they're kind of known for buzzing around European ports.
Russia doesn't have any warm water ports to the Atlantic or the Pacific, really. They have Kaliningrad and St. Petersburg and Novgorod. Murmansk ices over for like 7 months out of the year. So they have to run submarines secretly through the Baltic all the way past all these NATO countries to get to the Atlantic. So it's really their one port of launching. Yeah, and if war were to break out, I mean, their surface navy would be annihilated immediately. So they've always been running tons of these small, diesel subs, and their nukes go out. But a lot of traffic in that area, and then of course the NATO submarines are trying to tail their submarines, and it's a very busy.
It's busy down there. It's busy down there in the Baltic. Yeah,
no, busy bees, man, busy bees.
And the thing is, if a submarine did hit the MS Estonia, if it were a NATO submarine. At first I thought, well, okay, they'd cover that up. But, talking to people sort of in the know and reading more about the topic, if a NATO submarine hit a civilian ship, sort of the rules of the water is you have to rescue the survivors. It would probably be a better decision for them to kind of come clean about that than assume that they could get away with submarine manslaughter, which they probably couldn't have.
I mean, I don't quite believe that. The Soviets would have had a similar rule, but these were countries like Estonia that we were courting for NATO at the time. I mean, geopolitics comes into it. So
yeah, maybe I'm wrong there, but
but it supports your point. I mean, we would have come clean and apologized and so sorry. We picked your folks up. It was a mistake.
So yeah, if you're going to ram a submarine, even accidentally, into a civilian ship and then just sort of run off into the night, you'd have to be confident that you wouldn't be caught.
Well, there was the incident. I forget what the flight number was, but the United States straight up shot down an Iranian jet, and we owned up to it when the evidence came in. And then basically George H.W. Bush said, like, I won't apologize for it. It happened. So I think that if it happened, if the U.S. or a NATO company, they would probably just be like, yep, we were doing something necessary. We feel really bad that all these people died, but, like, what are you going to do about it? Give them some money or something.
Yeah,
I don't know, just accidentally hitting a passenger ship with a submarine and then saying, oh shit, and scurrying away just kind of sounds like the 90s Russian Navy MO.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh,
yeah.
Totally. I believe that.
I believe it.
This is fun because we're conspiracy theorizing. I mean, this is
this is what we're doing right now. We're looking at the story, and this would have been more taboo, I guess, or thought of less 10 years ago. But now, people have been saying this sort of stuff for years, and all of a sudden, a new investigation's opened.
It's crazy.
I'm on the edge of my seat, man. I want to know.
Oh yeah, I want to know too. This is stories unfolding, but it's a big deal when a government official says that he thinks that the conclusion that was come to 20 years ago is not true.
And that so many people were and still are traumatized by it. It's obviously a big cause celeb, and a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking maybe something's not right, and now all of a sudden they're vindicated, but they still don't know what actually happened.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I knew it. I knew someone did something. Something that horrible couldn't have just happened.
Or there's going to be some sort of rational explanation for why the hole is there. Like, I don't know, I can just make something up, like the visor banged into it after the visor came off, and then people will be back to square one.
Yeah, but, if that happens, will we actually accept it?
Right. Probably not.
Yeah, I know I won't.
That's just one more with conspiracy theorizing and the speculation. All of these things compound and just keep adding on to each other. And to try to talk somebody out of, like, 9/11 was an inside job, they'll throw another thing at you.
But you can't, because it's very emotional. It comes from sort of
Right.
a lack of good answers.
Right.
And especially in this disaster, there wasn't really any catharsis. Like, obviously, starting 2 forever wars, that's not the solution, but it's a solution. After the MS Estonia, the geopolitical changes were basically, this sucks. Ships became safer. That's kind of it.
We're going to reform regulations for constructing and maintaining large passenger vessels. Oh,
There's
great.
no moment of glory. No.
Awesome.
Not too heroic.
Yeah, we're going to say Saddam Hussein did it. He was shipping aluminum tubes on these vessels, and we're going to drop a nuke on Baghdad.
Well, it was his Bond villain submarine.
It was Putin's mini sub. He was testing the mini sub.
I like to imagine those pictures of like early subs from the 1800s where it's like one dude sitting there with a bunch of cranks.
A bicycle that he's,
Yeah. Like the Hunley or something, or the tortoise.
So, Jack, how would you interpret this disaster we've dipped our toes into?
Well, look, some emails were sent. We're going to have to be honest about this. No, it was bad. Part of the reason why it caused so many conspiracy theories is the psychological trauma of hearing so many people who you probably knew or who knew people who knew people die from this awful thing, and trying to assign some kind of cosmic significance to it. That goes back to human nature. There needs to be a reason why this happened. Cause and effect dictates that, but it also needs to be emotionally satisfying.
And
which
faulty
is where
welding
conspiracy comes
is
in.
not.
Yeah, faulty welding, not so much.
And so it can't just be that it was a poorly maintained old ship and that people were just kind of going along to get along with the safety inspections. No, it needs to be a Russian torpedo or saboteurs fighting over crates of guns or something. or the Soviet Three Stooges trying to push rocket launchers out of it and swamping the car.
Well, that also makes us feel
by-
safe, because if it's some crazy event like that, like then we don't have to worry about getting on a passenger ferry and having it sink.
Exactly.
Yeah. If it's something really mundane, then we have to start worrying.
And
Like
if it was, no, go ahead.
We don't have to worry about the everyday world killing us at any given time. Like if it's welding, then what else is not welded well? Not just ships, but planes.
Yeah, I mean, could I just get hit by a meteor right now and have it mean nothing?
Exactly.
No, of course not.
No, it's got to be the Tom Clancy novel about smuggling and MI5 and the CIA and the Capo, which is the Estonian secret police.
Don't we all just want to live in a more heroic and exciting world than we actually live in and know is out there? I mean, that's what we tell that's why we watch movies and we read books about exciting and heroic things. Unfortunately, most of the world and most of our lives are really mundane. That's just like how it goes. And so if you can also insert yourself into this fantasy and become, maybe you didn't actually experience it, but you can become part of the story by becoming an investigator about it.
Oh, shit. Okay, I'm sorry. It was a 13-foot hole. Not...
Oh, shit. That actually could have been an explosive then. Oh, my mind's going. See, I'm sorry. I was getting all rational. My mind's going again.
Okay, no, this is why I shouldn't be allowed to look at numbers or symbols.
Sorry, yeah, folks. Abby is enumerate.
Honestly, the more I do this, the more I'm like, am I a little bit dyslexic? This would explain some. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, 14-foot hole.
Well, that changes things. I mean, it could have been a sea
It could be a
lion
very
left
big
over from
rock.
World War II. Could have been a very large fish. The herringoss could have got into the hold and ate the salt and all the way through.
The herringoss, to explain to Radioland, is an Estonian folktale that the Baltic Sea is salty because herrings used to be kept on ships like cats. They had little legs.
Yeah.
So they could eat the mice.
Oh my god!
And
awesome.
One day the herringoss got greedy and he started eating the salt that the ship was carrying. And he ate through the ship and it sank and the sea became salty. And the sea god punished him by stealing his legs.
Oh shit! Maybe that's what did it, man. That's as plausible as anything.
That's how the ship went down. The herringoss. God.
The herringoss theory.
We're gonna have to play the Trap herringoss remix as the outro song because we're just flippant assholes.
Oh god! If I could get that licensed. Oof.
Oh well, I'll just steal it. I'll make a Trap remix. Probably Creative Commons if we're being honest. Those commies over in Europe. If we got to close out on this, maybe Sean, if you could help us create some kind of
my last
practical.
thought.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
My last thought is that everyone, if you have to go down, you want to go down on the modern Lusitania instead of getting pinned by a slot machine.
100%.
To be metaphorical.
Give me a blaze of glory, definitely.
A dignified death.
Yeah.
Sean?
Oh, sure. So, I saw recently, and this is maybe this could be our closing thing for the episode. We can get this done pretty quick. I saw recently a very pithy little graph that was going around on TikTok to try and explain to people why QAnon is not a good theory of the world. And it's an inverted pyramid. Yeah, very clever. With at the bottom rationality, and it was like, sky is blue, ground is down. Above it was slightly less plausible stuff like the Iraq War was a conspiracy, and we know that's true, so that's verified. And then some other stuff, and above that, it's like Bush did 9/11, and beyond that, it's like the Democrats are a pedophile cabal that eats baby brains. And it was a pithy little, very, very sardonic TikTok about how you classify these theories about the world by their ranking them by plausibility and truth. And I looked at that and I said, that is a list of beliefs that are acceptable versus unacceptable. That is not actually a practical method of determining whether something is or isn't a conspiracy theory. There's no universal principle here. When someone says something to me, how do I determine whether it's a conspiracy theory, a conspiracy fact, that is, crack up, or something else? So I was hoping that maybe you could use your big materialist brain. I can barely finish books. I need somebody to help me here. Abby can't do all the lifting. To help me create a praxis that I can use, a lens to determine what is and isn't a conspiracy theory. So maybe conspiracy theories are simple and unfalsifiable and don't follow Occam's razor or something like that. Just spitball it.
No, I think simplicity I think is really key here. If you're, you want to understand how something happened, how a particular dynamic works, if you find that you're adding all sorts of different elements to it, all sorts of different actors and all sorts of different this happened and that happened, chances are you're making these connections because you want to make them. You're trying to make them. I think that we should always be aware that the real world is complicated, and we should always be aware that there's always the possibility that there are people in the background pulling the strings or whatever. But there's no point in trying to make up elaborate shit to explain things that actually happen. For example, you don't need all of these conspiracy theories about these shadowy actors when, as I said before, we already have capitalism. And if we understand that structurally and materially, we have a lot of the answers for why things happen the way that they happen, and ultimately who's doing that, which is it's the market and it's capitalists and the government. That would be my best shot at it.
Yeah, so like more of a stop, slow down, let's distance ourselves from the emotions and analyze the whole world as a whole system.
Yeah, Jack, facts don't care about your feelings.
and also too, I would add, just to close it out, that even irrespective of all these conspiracies that happen, it would still be necessary to change the world, even if Bush didn't do 9/11. Right, it would still be necessary to try to make a better world.
You know what? Maybe the 9/11 is in our hearts.
Right.
Yeah.
JFK, being assassinated, whoever did it, it doesn't change the fact that like the Cold War was shitty and that things have gotten really worse. You know what I mean? Like
we are worse off because of it.
It doesn't even do the job it's supposed to do, which is explain the world in a satisfying way. And
right.
It never ever gives you actions that you can take. Like there's no practice associated with QAnon. You just it immobilizes you.
It's like if let's say the Russians torpedoed the MS Estonia 25 years ago. Okay, what now?
Yeah, exactly. What now? There is no what now, because I think that's one of the reasons why people are attracted to these sorts of theories, is because they don't ask you to actually do something. It asks you to sit there and speculate and navel gaze and like dive into some Wikipedia article or some book, but it never actually asks you to actually act in the world. And ultimately, these, what changes if the Estonia was taken down by a Russian sub? Nothing. We're still faced with the same problems we have today.
Yeah. And, all conspiracy theorizing is just three people on a Zoom call shooting the shit, and one of them has read some stuff. One of them hasn't read anything about the topic, but has read about other stuff, and one of them's kind of in between, and it never goes any further or deeper than that. I mean, the research that you get consists of listening to podcasts that aren't as good as ours, and
reading things that come from the governments that might be the culprits.
And reading shit from websites that tell you stuff you already believe. Like it's just
right.
It's shallow in a way that's kind of hard to put your finger on compared to trying to actually understand the world. And it's got nothing to do with being academic or being acceptable to mainstream society. Like I don't look.
Well, it's like everything I compiled is already out there. I didn't do anything.
Yeah. And we're not better than conspiracy theorists or more educated or anything like that. We just view things differently in a way that is probably more helpful and that gives maybe a path forward to stopping some of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
just being conscious of it.
We want to get rid of the kind of speculation that leads people down these rabbit holes, but we don't want to throw these people out. They need to be reintegrated back into a movement. They need to be brought in, and we need to affirm ultimately that they're right in some of the ways that the world is screwed up. But going after QAnon is certainly not the way to do it, not least because it's not real.
That definitely doesn't help that it's totally fake.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a wee little detail right there that kind of throws a wrench in some things.
We're burying the lead here.
Because even if it was real, what would you do about it, though? You know.
That's
Well,
true.
that's
If the
the flip side.
Democrats were eating baby brains, what can I don't know where they're going. I don't know where the baby brain trucks are.
Well, I would
Well, and
simply
the-
vote for the white hat pedophiles.
Yeah, because what's the takeaway? The takeaway, of course, from
That sounds like a
QAnon-
banned subreddit. Go on.
I think I
No,
have their
like-
records.
QAnon is simply waiting for somebody else to do the work anyways. It's waiting for the storm to come. It's waiting for like the secret
The
cabal to overthrow.
savior to liberate the babies from their brains.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's
It has to do
r/
to nothing.
r/the Donald meets Christian numerology just mutates into something. I've been watching QAnon since it came out of like 2017. I've been following it the whole time,
Oh, it's
and
fascinating stuff.
it's awesome.
Yeah, and actually, if you go inside of Jack's head, his brain looks like a cue ball.
I mean, let's not exaggerate. It's a little bit smooth, yes, but really, that's watching a lot of YouTube gaming.
Dermatologists hate him.
My collagen
Guys,
is
I
leaving
gotta take off. I gotta run up the street.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're
You wanna
done,
close it
but-
out?
Copy that. We're good. One thing I want to leave off on is a quote from one of these studies I pulled down. There was no support for the idea that people believe in conspiracies because they provide simplified explanations of complex events. People are trying to understand the world. They're just doing it the wrong way.
There you have it.
There you have it,
I think
folks.
that's the takeaway. So thank
Alright.
you so much,
Thank you, Sean. It was great
Uh,
talking to you.
Oh, you
Awesome.
too. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you. Listen to Antifada and the many other podcasts Sean is in.
The
Thanks
Sean
for that.
Extended Universe.
And listen to Crack Ops. Wait,
And
you're
listen
already
to Crack
doing
Op.
that.
Here
Listen
you
to more
are.
Crack Op.
You gotten this far. We thank you deeply. We're a little concerned for you, but we thank you.
Yeah, God bless for sitting through this. We're going to cut it down a little bit.
All right.
Bye.
So long, guys.
Hey, take it easy, man. Thanks.
You too. Later.
All right. That was Sean KB from the Antifada. Great podcast, especially if you're not actually into left politics. They give a very welcoming and interesting intro to that stuff. It's pretty approachable if you haven't read like all of Lenin's extended works.
It's
or
the
whatever
gateway
shit that
drug.
People ask you. Yeah, exactly. We're going to red pill you in a more literal sense. So thanks for listening. Check us out on Twitter at CrackOpsPod. Other people post. That's not me. I am not responsible for the views expressed.
Oh yeah, no one knows who posts for Crack Ops.
No,
It could be
it's-
anyone, really.
It could be any of the four of us, so I'm not responsible
It's
for
Boris Yeltsin's ghost. Actually, he's our new social media intern.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a great guy. I mean, he's
Eccentric.
interesting fellow. Thanks for listening, and remember, watch the skies.
Watch the skies. Good night.